The revolver's steel butt crashed against the man's jaw with a bone-shattering crack. Blood sprayed in a crimson arc across the weathered planks of the platform as onlookers gasped, then fell silent. One man spat tobacco juice in the dust. Another pulled his hat lower, refusing to watch but unwilling to leave. "The West ain't for the weak," I once told a greenhorn from Boston. "I've seen men kill each other over a misplaced word, for gold, for land. But what happened that day in Talon's Creek will haunt me to my grave." The crowd in the dusty town square shifted nervously as Silas Reed continued his business. Reed stood tall against the Arizona sky, a vulture in human form, pockmarked face, dead eyes that never blinked when he lied, dressed too fine for the frontier in his silk vest and gold watch chain. His voice carried across the square like the rasp of a rattlesnake's warning. On the platform beside him stood a Navajo woman, wrists bound with coarse rope, but spine straight as a cavalry officer's. Her dark eyes swept across the crowd with quiet defiance, cataloging every face, every coward who watched and did nothing. She wore a torn dress Reed had forced upon her, a twisted mockery of white civilization. "Gentlemen," Reed's voice boomed, "a fine specimen today, trained for domestic work." His hand gripped the woman's shoulder possessively, fingers digging into her flesh. "And remember my guarantee, full refund if this savage doesn't please you." The crowd erupted in coarse laughter, some men calling out suggestions that made my stomach knot with disgust. From the edge of the crowd, I watched, my hand resting on the worn grip of my Colt .45. The holster was custom-made, tied down low on my right thigh, a gunfighter's rig. I could feel the weight of every round in the cylinder, each one a potential judgment waiting to be delivered. My name is Jackson Harker, and I wasn't looking for trouble when I rode into Talon's Creek. Just supplies, maybe information, but trouble has a way of finding those who recognize it for what it is. As Reed's fingers tightened on the woman's shoulder, I saw her eyes flash, not with fear, but with a promise of vengeance that would come in this life or the next. In that moment, something inside me snapped, like a dry branch in winter. I'd seen enough. The crowd parted like water around a stone as I stepped forward, spurs jingling a deadly cadence with each deliberate step. Standing 6'2" with shoulders broadened by years of hard living, I wasn't a man people stood in the way of. My hair, once dark as coal, now showed streaks of gray beneath my wide-brimmed hat. A scar ran from my left temple to my jaw. A rebel saber at Shiloh had come damn close to sending me to meet my maker. "Hold up there," I called out, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "I've got business with this auction." Reed's eyes narrowed as he sized me up. He recognized the stance, weight balanced on the balls of my feet, right hand hanging loose near my sidearm, the look of a man who's drawn iron with intent more than once. "Well now," Reed drawled, yellow teeth showing behind cracked lips. "Another bidder? What's your offer, stranger?" Without a word, I reached into my coat and pulled out a leather pouch. The dull clink of gold pieces silenced the crowd as I tossed it onto the platform. It landed with a weighty thud at Reed's boots. Reed's eyebrows raised as he counted. "That's considerable. Might be overpaying, mister." "I'm not bidding," I said, my voice level as a gunfighter's aim. "I'm buying her freedom." A confused murmur ran through the crowd. Reed's face darkened, eyes going flat and cold as a winter pond. "That ain't how it works," he said, his hand sliding toward the revolver at his hip. "It is today." My coat fell open, revealing my Colt. I hadn't drawn, but the message was clear as a church bell on Sunday. For a long moment, we locked eyes. The crowd held its breath. I could see the calculation in Reed's gaze, weighing the gold against his pride, measuring my stance against his draw. Then his greed won out. He pocketed the gold, then nodded to his man to cut the woman's binds. "She's yours," Reed sneered, "but remember my guarantee. You find her unsatisfactory, you come back for your refund." His eyes held a promise of their own. This wasn't over. I stepped onto the platform and used my own knife to cut the ropes from the woman's wrists. She flinched at my approach, but stood her ground, muscles tense like a cornered mountain lion. "I don't want a slave," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "No man has the right to own another." I turned to her and spoke quietly. "You're free to go wherever you want. Or you can come with me until you find your people. Your choice." Her eyes, dark as midnight, studied mine for any sign of deception. The intensity of her gaze would have made most men look away. "Why should I trust you?" she asked in perfect English, the words flowing with an educated precision that caught me off guard. "You shouldn't," I replied honestly. "But I'm offering safety until you decide what's next. No conditions." After a moment's hesitation, she gave a slight nod. As we walked away, Reed called after us, "This ain't over, Harker. That savage is merchandise." I didn't turn around, but my right hand twitched near my holster. "She's a woman with a name. What is it?" I asked her quietly. "Kaya," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, Kaya, let's get out of this cesspool." That night, a nightmare jolted me awake, sweat-soaked and reaching for my gun. In the dream, my brother Thomas was calling for me, blood bubbling from his lips as he tried to warn me of something I couldn't hear. I'd failed him once, wouldn't do it again. I hadn't always lived alone in the shadows of Black Mesa. Years back, I rode with the Union Army as a scout. I could track a rattlesnake across bare rock and shoot the eye out of a hawk at 300 yards. The war taught me many things: how to kill, how to survive, and the true measure of a man. When the fighting ended, I couldn't return to civilization. Too many ghosts walked with me. So I drifted west, where a man could build a life with his hands and be judged by his actions, not his past. My cabin sat high on a ridge overlooking a small valley, one approach, easy to defend. I'd built it myself, every log and nail. Inside was sparse but functional: a stone fireplace, wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books on everything from law to medicine, and weapons, rifles, shotguns, and pistols, placed strategically throughout. As we approached on horseback, Kaya took in the surroundings with careful scrutiny. I could tell she was mapping escape routes, noting landmarks. Smart woman. "There's a creek on the north side," I said, reading her thoughts. "Good water. Game is plentiful in the valley below. If you decide to leave, follow the creek east for 2 days. You'll reach Navajo lands. Should be safe since the Treaty of 1868, though the government's promises ain't worth the paper they're printed on." She gave me a sidelong glance. "You know much about surviving in this country." Had to learn. I dismounted, wincing slightly as my right shoulder protested. An old rebel bullet at Shiloh had shattered my collarbone, never healed quite right. Inside the cabin, I showed her where everything was kept. "You take the bed," I said, pointing to the small frame against the wall. "I'll sleep by the door." "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Why spend gold to free a stranger?" I busied myself with lighting the fire, watching the kindling catch, remembering other fires, other times. Before my father died, he told me something I never forgot: do right, even when the whole world does wrong. I've failed him more times than I care to count, but today wasn't going to be another. I didn't mention Thomas, gunned down by our own side when he tried to stop the massacre of a Southern family. Some memories cut too deep. "The door has no lock," I added, changing the subject. "You're not a prisoner here. Rest tonight, decide tomorrow." That night, I slept on the floor near the door, my Winchester within arm's reach. Old habits die hard. The next morning, I showed Kaya the traps I'd set around the property, not to keep her in, but to warn of anyone approaching. Simple contraptions made of wire and wood that would snap loudly if triggered. "Smart," she acknowledged, studying the mechanism. "My people use similar warnings." We spent the day gathering herbs and checking snares. I was impressed by her knowledge of plants, which could heal, which could kill. "My grandmother was a healer," she explained, crushing a leaf between her fingers and inhaling the scent. "Before the soldiers came." I didn't press for details. Everyone in this country carried their share of tragedy. Back at the cabin, I took down my spare Remington shotgun and handed it to her. "Know how to use this?" She nodded, checking the action with practiced ease. Not my first choice, but effective. Double-barreled, 12-gauge. Kicks like a mule, but you don't have to aim perfect. Just point in their general direction and they'll reconsider their intentions. Number 4, buckshot. Each shell carries 27 pellets, spreads about an inch per yard. At close range, it'll tear a man in half. Who will come? She asked, though I suspect she already knew. Reed. Men like him don't take kindly to having their authority challenged. I loaded the Winchester and propped it by the door. My Colt rested on the table as I cleaned it meticulously, the familiar ritual calming my thoughts. 45 caliber, 250 grain bullet, accurate to about 50 yards in the right hands. Drops a man with one shot, most times. That evening, while I cooked a rabbit stew, Kaya fashioned new arrows from wood she'd gathered. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each motion economical and purposeful. Your tribe? I asked. Scattered. Raiders hit our camp 2 winters ago. Those who survived were separated. Some sold to men like Reed, others to the mines down south. Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around the arrow shaft. My sister was taken first. I never saw her again. Before I could respond, one of my perimeter traps snapped. We both froze, listening. Then came another snap, closer. Back door, I whispered, grabbing the Winchester. Kaya was already moving, shotgun in hand, taking position at the side window. 3 riders approached from the west, silhouetted against the setting Sunday. Even at a distance, I recognized Reed's tall frame. The other 2 were hard cases, hired guns with worn holsters and dead eyes. Harker, Reed called out, let's talk business. I stepped onto the porch, Winchester held casually across my body, barrel angled low but ready to swing up. The lever action held 15 rounds of 44 to 40 ammunition, enough to handle these 3 and more besides. Nothing to discuss, Reed. Turn around and leave my property. Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. Now, that's not neighborly. I came about our transaction. The goods weren't as advertised. There was no transaction, I replied evenly. I paid for her freedom, not ownership. Now get off my land. Reed's face hardened. That savage belongs to me under frontier law. I'm taking her back, by force if necessary. One of his men shifted his weight, hand drifting toward his holster. I recognized the move. I'd seen it before men died. What happened next occurred in the space of heartbeats. The gunman drew, but before he could level his weapon, a deafening boom erupted from the side window. Kaya had fired one barrel of the shotgun, the blast kicking up dirt at the horse's feet. The animals reared in panic, nearly unseating the riders. In the confusion, I leveled the Winchester and fired a precise shot through the shoulder of the second gunman. He screamed, dropping his pistol and clutching his bleeding arm. Next one's through your head, Reed, I called out, working the lever to chamber another round. Test me and find out. Reed struggled to control his frightened horse. This isn't over, Harker. That woman is mine under the law. There's no law that says one person can own another, I replied coldly. Not here, not anywhere. Come back, and I'll bury you under that ridge yonder. The wounded gunman was moaning, blood seeping between his fingers. Reed gave me one last venomous glare before they retreated down the trail. The injured man slumped over his saddle. I waited until they were out of sight before lowering my rifle. Inside, Kaya was already reloading the shotgun, her movements calm and methodical. They'll be back, she said matter-of-factly, with more men. Yes, I agreed, but we'll be ready. That night, after securing the cabin, I sat by the fire cleaning my Colt. The blue steel gleamed in the firelight as I oiled each part with practiced precision. Why does Reed risk so much for one escaped prisoner? I wondered aloud. Kaya looked up from where she was fletching arrows. Because if one escapes without punishment, others will try. Men like Reed don't just trade bodies, they trade in fear. Her words hung in the air between us. She was right, of course. This wasn't just about one woman anymore. It was about power and control. There's more, she added after a moment. Reed works for others. Powerful men who supply workers to the silver mines in New Mexico. My people, Mexicans, Chinese, anyone who won't be missed. I fitted the cylinder back into my revolver, the click unnaturally loud in the quiet room. How many? Dozens, perhaps hundreds now. They moved them at night, in wagons with false bottoms. The gravity of what we were facing settled on me like a physical weight. This wasn't just one slaver. It was an organization with money and influence. Dangerous odds, even for a man with my experience. We need to see Sheriff Murphy in town, I decided. Kaya's laugh was bitter. The law doesn't protect my kind, Harker. Maybe not, I conceded. But if we're going to fight this, we need to know who stands where. Sheriff Tom Murphy's office smelled of cheap whiskey and stale tobacco. The man himself matched his surroundings, worn out, beaten down by years of compromise. His badge, once a symbol of justice, now just a piece of metal pinned to a dirty shirt. You're stirring up a hornet's nest, Harker, Murphy said, leaning back in his creaking chair. Reed brings business to this town. Nobody cares what happens to a few savages. They're people, I replied, struggling to keep my temper in check. Men, women, children. Murphy shrugged. Law's complicated out here. No, it isn't. I leaned forward, planting both hands on his desk. Murder is murder. Kidnapping is kidnapping. Slavery is slavery. Nothing complicated about it. Look, Harker. Murphy sighed. I sympathize. I really do. But I'm one man with a 10-star. Reed has connections all the way to Santa Fe. Judges, politicians, businessmen, they all got interests in those mines. So, you're not going to help. Murphy had the decency to look ashamed. I can't. I straightened up, disgust plain on my face. Then you're not a lawman. You're just a coward with a badge. Outside, Kaya waited with the horses, her face impassive. The sheriff will not help, she stated. It wasn't a question. No, I confirmed. But I know someone who might. Sam Cooper's general store sat at the edge of town. Cooper had fought with the Union Army, lost a leg at Gettysburg. Unlike many veterans, he'd found a way to build something after the war. Not just a business, but a reputation for straight dealing with everyone, regardless of color or creed. The bell jingled as we entered. Cooper looked up from behind the counter, surprise registering on his weathered face at the sight of Kaya. Harker, he nodded in greeting. Been a while. Need information, Sam, I said, getting straight to business. Cooper's eyes darted to the open door, then back to us. Close that, he said quietly. What I'm about to tell you ain't for public consumption. With the door shut, Cooper lowered his voice. Reed's part of something bigger. Started about 2 years back when the Morenci mines hit a rich silver vein. Same time they were pushing the Southern Pacific Railroad through. Needed workers fast, didn't want to pay white wages. Slavery, I said flatly. Cooper nodded grimly. They move them through here every month. Next shipment's tomorrow night. 10 wagons, headed south through Apache Pass. How many guards? 15, maybe 20, armed to the teeth. I exhaled slowly, calculating odds. That's a hard fight, even with surprise. It's suicide, Cooper corrected, unless... Unless what? Kaya pressed. Cooper reached beneath the counter and pulled out a tattered map. There's a narrow canyon here, he pointed. Wagons have to go single file. Flash flood cut it deeper last spring. Right place for an ambush, if a man was crazy enough to try. I studied the map, doubt creeping in for the first time. 20 against 2, even with the high ground, those aren't good odds. Cooper reached for his crutch and moved to the back room, gesturing for us to follow. He unlocked a heavy chest and threw back the lid. Inside lay several sticks of dynamite, fuses, and blasting caps, left over from when they were blasting for the new rail line, he explained. Been saving them for a rainy day. I looked at the explosives, then at Kaya. What we were considering would make us outlaws, hunted across the territory. If we failed, those people would remain enslaved. If we succeeded, powerful men would want revenge. You don't have to do this, I told her. This isn't your fight anymore. Her eyes flashed. It was my fight the moment they took my sister. That night, I couldn't sleep. The faces of men I'd killed in the war visited me, some in uniform, some not. Would tomorrow add more ghosts to that parade? Was I risking Kaya's life on a fool's crusade? Near dawn, I stepped outside to clear my head. To my surprise, Kaya was already there, watching the eastern sky lighten. "Having second thoughts?" she asked without turning. "No," I lied. Then, because she deserved the truth, "Yes, this could go wrong in 100 ways. And if we do nothing, it goes wrong for certain." She turned to face me. "My people have a saying. A warrior dies but once, a coward dies 1,000 deaths." I nodded slowly. Mine say something similar. The decision was made. We would ride at first light. Dawn broke cold and clear. We rode out while Talon's Creek still slept, 2 riders casting long shadows across the desert floor. Cooper's map tucked safely in my saddlebag, dynamite packed carefully in our provisions. The canyon was just as Cooper described, narrow with high walls of red sandstone. A creek trickled down its center, carving a deeper channel each year. The wagon trail hugged one wall, barely wide enough for a team to pass. Up there, I pointed to a ledge overlooking the trail. Good sight lines, protected position. Kaya studied the terrain with a tracker's eye. They will have scouts riding ahead. That's why we need to be ready. I dismounted, retrieving the Winchester from its scabbard. "You take position up high. I'll set charges along the trail." For the next hour, I worked carefully, burying sticks of dynamite at strategic points, before the canyon entrance, at its narrowest point, and near the exit. Each connected to fuses long enough to give me time to retreat after lighting them. Meanwhile, Kaya climbed to her perch, bow and arrow slung across her back, the shotgun secured beside her. From that vantage, she could rain death down while remaining protected from return fire. By midday, the trap was set. All that remained was to wait. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold, a dust cloud rose from the trail, riders approaching. "Get to your position," I said, checking the Colt one last time. "Remember, wait for my signal." Kaya touched my arm briefly. "If we die today, we die with honor. Plan is to live with it instead," I replied with a grim smile. She melted away into the rocks like a shadow. I crouched behind a boulder near the canyon entrance, watching the dust cloud grow larger. Soon I could make out riders, 2 scouts about a quarter-mile ahead of the main group. The scouts entered the canyon cautiously, rifles across their saddles, eyes scanning the walls. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows as they passed, barely breathing. Once they cleared the first bend, I struck a lucifer and touched it to the first fuse. The flame sputtered to life, crawling toward its deadly target. I scrambled to a new position, waiting. The explosion, when it came, shook the ground beneath my feet. Screams and the terrified whinnies of horses echoed through the canyon. Perfect. The blast had cut off the scouts from the main party, but hadn't killed anyone. Not yet. The main convoy approached the canyon entrance. 10 wagons with canvas covers, each pulled by a 4-horse team. Armed men rode alongside, now alert and nervous after hearing the explosion. Reed himself rode near the front, a scattergun resting across his saddle. I touched flame to the second fuse, then drew the Colt. The blast erupted just as the lead wagon entered the canyon, sending horses rearing and men diving for cover. In the chaos, I stepped out and fired. 1, 2, 3 shots in rapid succession. 3 guards fell from their saddles. From above, arrows rained down with deadly precision. Kaya's first volley took 2 more guards, the shafts finding gaps in their defenses. Panicked shouts filled the air. "It's an ambush!" someone yelled. Reed's voice cut through the chaos. "Form up! Return fire!" Bullets chipped stone around me as I ducked back into cover. The guards had recovered quickly, spreading out to present harder targets. Reed was no fool. He'd hired professionals. I worked my way along the canyon wall, staying in shadow. The final charge was in position near the convoy's middle, where the wagons were bunched tightest. If I could reach it, A guard spotted my movement, swinging his rifle in my direction. Before he could fire, an arrow sprouted from his chest. He toppled forward, his shot going wild. Kaya was watching over me. I made it to the third fuse, struck another match. The explosion tore through the center of the convoy, flipping one wagon entirely and setting another ablaze. Screams erupted, not just from guards this time, but from inside the wagons. The captives, I realized with horror. They're chained inside. Reed bellowed orders, trying to maintain control. Half his men were down, the others pinned by Kaya's deadly accuracy. He spotted me as I moved toward the burning wagon and raised his scattergun. The boom echoed through the canyon as buckshot tore into my left side. White-hot pain exploded through my ribs, but adrenaline kept me moving. I returned fire, but Reed was already diving between wagons. "Harker," he shouted, "you're dead, you hear me? Dead." I gritted my teeth against the pain and pressed on, reaching the overturned wagon. Inside, I could hear pounding and desperate cries. Using the Bowie knife, I slashed through the canvas covering and found what I feared. Men and women chained to the wagon bed, now trapped as flames began spreading from the adjacent vehicle. "Hold still," I commanded, searching for the lock that secured their chains. Finding it, I smashed it with the butt of my pistol, once, twice, until it broke open. "Get to cover," I ordered, helping them scramble out. The burning wagon groaned as timbers weakened. I dragged the last captive clear just as the wagon collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning debris. More gunfire erupted around us. I pushed the freed captives toward a protected overhang, feeling blood seeping through my shirt, my vision beginning to blur at the edges. Reed stood 20 paces away, reloading his scattergun. Our eyes met over the smoking ruins of his operation. "You've ruined everything," he snarled. That was the plan. I kept the Colt leveled at his chest, fighting to keep my arms steady as blood loss weakened me. "Drop the shotgun or die where you stand." For a moment, I thought he might comply. Then his eyes hardened, and I knew what would come next. His move was fast. I'll give him that. The scattergun came up in a blur of motion, but I'd been in this dance before. The Colt barked once in my hand. Reed staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as a dark stain blossomed on his chest. The scattergun discharged harmlessly into the ground as he fell. I approached cautiously, kicking the weapon away from his reaching fingers. Reed coughed, blood speckling his lips. "You're a dead man, Harker," he wheezed. "They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." I knelt beside him, pressing my hand against my own bleeding side. Maybe, but today, these people go free. His eyes glazed over, fixing on something I couldn't see. Then Reed was gone, another ghost to join those already walking with me. The remaining guards, seeing their leader fall, threw down their weapons. Kaya descended from her position, bow in hand, face streaked with dirt, but eyes bright with fierce satisfaction. She saw my wound and rushed to my side. "You're hit." "It's nothing," I lied, though the edges of my vision were darkening. "Help the others first." Together, we freed the captives from the remaining wagons, 23 in all, mostly Navajo and Mexican, though there were a few Chinese workers as well. Some were barely more than children. One elderly Navajo man approached us, his wrists raw from the chains. He spoke to Kaya in their language. She listened, then translated. "He says you have the heart of Naye Nezgani, monster slayer, a protector of the people." I tried to shake my head, but the movement sent pain shooting through me. "Tell him I'm just a man, trying to balance the scales." Then the world tilted sideways, and I collapsed into darkness. I woke to the smell of sage and the soft murmur of voices. Kaya sat beside me, grinding herbs in a stone mortar. My side was bandaged tightly, the pain dulled to a persistent throb. "How long?" I rasped. 3 days, she answered. "The buckshot tore through muscle but missed anything vital. You were lucky." "The captives?" "Safe. Cooper arranged passage for those who needed it. The Navajo have gone east with 2 guides from my tribe who came when they heard what happened. It took 2 more weeks before I could ride again. By then, word had spread throughout the territory about what happened in Apache Pass. Some called it a massacre, others a liberation. The territorial governor issued a statement condemning vigilante actions, but took no steps to investigate the slave trade itself. When Cooper visited, he brought troubling news. Bounty hunters been asking around town, $500 for information on your whereabouts. Dead or alive, I asked. They didn't specify. That usually means they don't care. I nodded grimly. Time to move on then. That evening, as I packed what little I owned, Kaya watched from the doorway. Will you return to your people now? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She studied me for a long moment. My people are scattered, my family gone. Her hand rested lightly on my arm. I have found honor where I did not expect it. Perhaps there is a place for me here. Something tight in my chest loosened. My cabin's not much, but it's peaceful. Good place to heal. And to build something new, she added. In the months that followed, more bounty hunters came. 3 tried to take us at the cabin, their bones bleached in the Arizona Sunday. 2 more tracked us into Navajo territory. They never returned to collect their pay. Eventually, we moved further north, establishing a trading post on the edge of Navajo territory, a place where her people could trade fairly, without fear of being cheated or worse. We became a way station for those in trouble, a neutral ground where justice sometimes prevailed when the law failed. At night, sitting on the porch of our expanded cabin, watching the sunset paint the mesa in gold and crimson, I sometimes think about choices and consequences, about standing aside or standing up. In this land, I once told a traveler, a man's honor lies in what he does, not what he says. They say the West was built by gunfighters and gold seekers, but that's only part of the story. It was also built by those who stood against the tide, who chose right over easy, who recognized that freedom isn't just for some, but for all. I couldn't save my brother when it mattered most. But standing on that ridge, Kaya beside me, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, I know one thing for certain. I've finally saved myself. The end. In the hills beyond Talon's Creek, dust rises from a dozen approaching riders. Word is spread of a gang moving north, men with cold eyes and notched guns. Men who leave only corpses in their wake. The sheriff has fled. The townspeople cower behind locked doors. Only one man stands ready at the edge of town, a Winchester in his weathered hands and a Navajo woman with a bow at his side. Some battles, it seems, choose the warrior. Coming soon, Blood Trail, the next chapter in the saga of Jackson Harker.